Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. On this podcast, I share my experience, strength, and hope from recovery. I don't support or endorse any particular 12-step recovery fellowship, and I don't claim to speak for any of them either. My hope is that you will find my words helpful in some way, whether you're in recovery or not. This is episode 90, Becoming Whole. I can't believe this is episode 90, and in only 10 more episodes, I will have reached episode 100. So hard to believe. I want to do something really special for episode 100, but I'm really not sure what. When I got to episode 50, I solicited questions from listeners and then answered them on the podcast, and it took a lot longer than the typical podcast. So maybe I can do something like that again. But if you have thoughts about what I could do to celebrate episode 100, I would love to hear them. You can either DM me on Instagram at Higher Power Coaching, or you can email me at barb@higherpowercc.com. I'd love to get your suggestions and do something that you think would be a cool way to celebrate this milestone. Somebody mentioned that I could do a video panel and take live questions. I'm not sure yet if that's what I'll do or not, but I am open to suggestions. So if you have a thought, message me. What I want to talk about this week has to do with the name of the podcast, Fragmented to Whole. This topic came up because I had this same conversation this week that I have on a regular basis with people in recovery as well as with my clients. And it's about the fact that I'm able to look back at my life before recovery and see with crystal clarity, here's what I was thinking, here's what I was doing, and here's what my motives were. One of the things that I'm able to look back and see is that I kind of felt like I was a bunch of fragmented pieces that were sort of floating around in space, kind of near each other, but they had spaces between them. And because there were spaces between them, other people's shit could leak into my territory because I had no boundaries. And I wasn't really sure where I ended and others began. And what's happened is that my fragments have integrated into a whole piece. In addition to the fragments integrating into one whole piece, the fragments that were there that weren't really me or mine are gone. And the way I think about me being whole is like this. I can still be rocked by things that happen to me, but I can't be shattered by them the way that I could previously because I was already fragmented. The other night, someone used this phrase that perfectly described my experience. She said, I feel like my nervous system has been reset. I was like, yes! She also said, I have a spaciousness around my decision-making now that I didn't used to have before. And I also said, yes. I could not have come up with those phrases on my own, but they're absolutely perfect descriptions of my experience. And I think that these are all ways of talking about being whole. The way I experience my wholeness is that things happen, bad things happen, difficult things happen, triggering things happen to me still. Of course they do. I'm still human. But they don't take away from my wholeness. Another way of saying I'm whole might be to say I've discovered my real identity. I know who I really am and who I am not. One of the tools that has helped me tremendously with delineating who I am is boundaries. In addition to being an incredibly important tool of recovery, boundaries are actually a gift of my recovery. There's so many aspects of recovery that went into creating healthy boundaries for me and therefore my wholeness. It's boundaries that I use to define this is where Barb ends and other people begin. Being whole means I'm not riddled with fear any longer. I don't feel like I need to hide. I've come out from behind all of those different facades that I was wearing. And I think one of the reasons that I became fragmented was that I had all these different facades, or you could call them masks or fake identities that I hid behind. For example, I hid behind the mask of, oh yeah, I can afford that. Or the mask of, I have all the answers. Or the mask of, whatever you want to do is fine with me. Because I didn't feel whole, I felt so fragile, even though I didn't know it at the time. And even though I've always felt like I was a pretty strong woman, my identity was not whole. Too much of my identity was up for negotiation, and this was especially so in my romantic relationships. My identity was not solid and clear. Now I'm very sure of who I am and who I am not. I don't feel the need to take on things that are not me. I don't feel the need to pretend things are true about me that aren't. When I try to understand what specifically I did to create this wholeness and the ability to establish boundaries in my life, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it was. It was a lot of things, like learning to keep the focus on myself instead of others, which I've talked about elsewhere on this podcast. I've also written about it on Medium. I've reached out for help from other people and not tried to go it alone all the time. I also have a podcast and an article on that. Staying connected to my higher power. Even though I was a spiritual person before recovery, my spirituality was nothing like it is. And I have a solidity about me and an assuredness because I'm not relying on my own power. I'm relying on a higher power. But it's also coming to really genuinely love and like myself that has contributed to my wholeness and me being able to have healthy boundaries. I thought I liked myself before, and in some ways I did, but I didn't truly love myself. Loving myself has meant that I accept my flaws and love me anyway. Remember from previous episodes, we're all flawsome. It also means that I show up for myself. I take care of myself by doing things that give me energy and make me healthy and bring me joy. All of these things contribute to my wholeness. And now that I'm whole, it's not something that can be taken away from me. Whereas in the past, because I was so fragmented, it was easy to shatter me. Nobody from the outside world would have ever been able to see these things about me. I think that many people who've known me for a long time might be surprised to learn that I have felt like a fragmented person. Hell, I didn't even know it, and I'm me. This idea of integrating all of the different pieces of me into one coherent, integrated whole is such a perfect description of my recovery. I realized from doing an art project recently that all of these different fragments that I had contained some part of me. They'd just been morphed a bit. For example, I really do want to be accommodating to people, but not to the point where I compromise my own integrity. And I really do want to be helpful to people and generous with my money, but it's a matter of degrees. Like, how far do I want to go? In the past, I went so far as to put myself into debt because I acted like I could afford things that I couldn't because of what I wanted people to think of me. 100% of my financial problems that I had previously in my life were a result of codependence. That is, I cared much more what other people thought of me. And now that I love myself and I'm whole and I have healthy boundaries, I don't, quote, need other people's approval the way I used to, because I have my own approval. And that's what counts, because I have to live in my own skin and nobody else does. And now, finally, after over 5 decades on this planet, I am extremely comfortable in my own skin. May that be so for you too. That's it for today. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. If you like what you've heard here, you might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, then head on over to barbchat.net, where you can get on my calendar for a free 20-minute consultation to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, then go to barbchat.net and get on my calendar. I'd love to chat with you. Please like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast outlet. This helps other people find me. Thanks for listening.